Hey, so recently Terrence Howard went on Joe Rogan and said some of the most unhinged things I think I've ever heard anyone say ever, and I want to talk about it. Now, if you don't know who Terrence Howard is, he's an actor. A lot of people know him from being in the popular show Empire, as well as his role in Iron Man that was quickly passed off to someone else following disputes over his pay. Either way, he's most known for being an actor, but for the past few years, he's been making somewhat of a pivot in his career. And you may be wondering, oh, maybe instead of acting, he's moving behind the camera into directing, or maybe he's going into music like a lot of other actors have. And, you know, close, but not quite. You see, Terrence Howard decided that his true passion was, how do I explain this? Becoming a grifter and faking genius intellect to sell morons on his moron ideas?
How is it that multiplication, if it means to make more and increase in number, how is 1 times 1 equaling 1 part of the multiplication table?
That's right, after retiring from acting a couple of years ago, Terrence Howard's main goal has been to convince the world that he is a super genius that has uncovered various truths about the world that they don't want you to know via his research and the basic laws of common sense.
And I was going to spend 40 years rebuilding the periodic table, and I found out that Walter Russell had already did that.
And when you say rebuild the periodic table, what do you mean specifically?
You'll see hydrogen sitting all the way over there by itself, but they don't show that hydrogen has the same tone as carbon.
What do you mean by tone?
Same tone, same key of E. Same key of E.
Among other insane claims that are just barely more intelligible than complete word salad, Terrence claims that 1 times 1 actually equals 2, that 0 doesn't exist,
They have a thing called zero.
that he's going to kill gravity,
We're about to kill gravity. We're about to kill their god, gravity, and they don't want that.
that the Pythagorean theorem is wrong, and a whole bunch of other shit that is so poorly communicated and vaguely described that it's more akin to a stroke than an actual academic theory.
Nature doesn't allow us to unravel that, but now with the wave conjugations, we can. We couldn't do that before because we didn't know the angles of incidence that were necessary to open these things up. And you couldn't do that with the Platonic solids because the Platonic solids were averages and approximations.
And the main reason I want to talk about this today isn't because his ideas are so crazy. People say crazy things all the time. The reason I'm making this video is because people believe him. And it's not just like a small minority of people, it's a lot of people. You can see it in the comments of every video he's in, how he's such a genius, how he's on a different level, how he's gonna change the world. And I'll be straight up honest with you guys. That shit makes me feel like I'm going insane. Because like, take his Rogan appearance, right? To me, the things he says and how he says them are so openly and transparently deceptive, vague, and incoherent that you can only come to one conclusion after listening to him talk, which is that he doesn't understand any of what he's saying and he's openly lying.
I remember being born, I remember being circumcised, I remember the whole nine.
But then you scroll down to the comments hoping to see the same sentiment, and it's just thousands of people taking glazing to a whole new level. So that's why I want to take a look at Terrence Howard today. I want to explore the claims he's making, why he's making them, and why so many people believe him without evidence. Let's get into it. Now, his recent appearance on Rogan actually isn't the first time Terrence Howard has been on my radar. I remember this insane video that surfaced in 2018 of him on some red carpet talking about his research. And as far as I can tell, this is the first time Terrence talks publicly about his, as he puts it, discoveries.
I've made some discoveries in my own personal life with the science that, you know, Pythagoras was searching for. I was able to open up the flower of life properly and find the real wave conjugations that we've been looking for 10,000 years.
Ah, yes, the wave conjugations, 10,000 years ago, yeah. No, I do remember the cave paintings indicating this, yeah. When humans were first discovering agriculture, we were also around the same time discovering advanced particle physics. This is true, and not the ramblings of someone who's been divorced 4 times. Also, I don't think this needs to be said, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Almost nothing in this clip meant anything. Pythagoras wasn't a scientist, he was a philosopher, and real wave conjugations is a non-term that means nothing. There just isn't something called a real wave conjugation in any branch of science. He just made it up.
I've got an entire generation to teach a whole new world.
Terrence Howard absolutely loves making shit up that doesn't make any sense and then talking about it as if everyone is on the same page with him, nodding along understandingly. Here's him on The View talking about his groundbreaking discoveries in the field of mathematics.
Now, a couple years ago, I did an article for the Rolling Stones, and they said I was crazy because I was telling them that the square root of 2 was a rational number. This is the proof that the square root of 2 is a rational number.
No, it's not. It's some weird bubble thing you made, actually. Behold, the proof that 9 plus 10 equal 21.
You stupid.
You see, Terrence, proofs are usually written on paper because they're ideas, not objects.
Now, this is the point where 4 bubbles meet equally and oppositely.
Can I touch it?
Yes, and it's where 12 planes meet. This is an undiscovered geometry that I'm now making known to the world here on this show.
Isn't that fantastic?
So this is exactly what I mean when I say he's so bold and open about the fact that he's lying that it actually troubles me and deals psychic damage to my soul. Like, let's just stop and think for 1 second about what it is he actually just said. He said the square root of 2 is a rational number. It isn't. And he has proof. He doesn't, which is this balloon animal adjacent object that is undiscovered geometry. It's not, which somehow proves his hypothesis. It doesn't. He doesn't explain how this object proves anything. He doesn't even make any connection at all between this strange object and the square root of 2. In fact, he doesn't even mention the number 2 when describing the object. He quite literally could have taken any other item from like around his house and claimed that it was proof for the square root of 2, and we would have gotten the same amount of information from that as we did with what I can only assume is that gymnasium for hamsters.
1 times 1 must equal more than 1. And to have the physical proof of it, that kind of shakes things up a bit.
This example of him on The View trying to explain his hypothesis and failing miserably to communicate even the slightest amount of meaning is exactly the type of behavior that I want to highlight in this video. Terrence Howard is either delusional, a liar, or both. He seeks knowledge without evidence, recognition without accreditation, and intellectual validation without valid claims, which unfortunately makes the Joe Rogan podcast the perfect place for someone like him to go. Because think about it. If you were someone with completely insane ideas that make flat earthers look like Harvard graduates, if you wanted to access a wide audience who will uncritically accept your insane ideas without evidence, ideas that neatly parallel with conspiracy theories already believed by said audience, if you wanted a group of people so primed to believe anything as long as it contradicts a popular narrative, if you wanted intellectual validation from people without the academic experience necessary to perceive your lies, if you wanted to look intelligent and accomplished without actually having to put in the work to achieve something, where would you go? And that is why everyone is talking about his Joe Rogan Experience. Because not only is Terrence Howard the perfect grifter capable of convincing people without evidence, but the Joe Rogan Experience is the perfect platform for someone like that. A built-in, easily malleable audience who are receptive to all ideas regardless of their integrity and substance, paired flawlessly with someone who has theories built on nothing to sell people on. And so with that, let's take a look at Terrence Howard's appearance on Joe Rogan. So as much as I might want to, and as fun as I think it would be, I'm not going to be going over Terrence Howard's Joe Rogan Appearance like claim by claim and debunking all of the weird shit he says over the course of 3 hours. That would take entirely too long, and there are already videos like that debunking him, one of which from Professor Dave is actually really great, entertaining, informative. I highly recommend that video if you're looking for like a long-form debunking. But in this video, we're going to be focusing mainly on the language and methods by which he conveys his ideas, and the effect that they seem to have on people. Now, it's not quite clear why Terrence Howard says the things that he says, but if one thing should be made absolutely clear, it's that on some level, Terrence Howard knows what he's saying is not true. To some undetermined extent, he is actively lying about the things that he knows and believes. And normally I would call someone like him a grifter, someone who lies for their own material or financial benefit. But it's not really clear if he financially benefits from talking about his ideas at all. He isn't trying to sell anything. He isn't trying to promote promote a product. He isn't trying to rope people into an ideology. And for the most part, it comes across as an authentic attempt to share ideas, if you put aside the fact that he's being dishonest about them. And that's one of the intriguing yet confusing things about Terrence Howard. His approach, while blatantly deceptive and aimed at fooling people, seems to lack an ulterior motive, which to me can only be indicative of an interior motive. A lot of people say that Terrence Howard is a delusional narcissist, that he simply has a fixed delusion that he is hyperfixated on and largely unaware of that compels him to share it with others. That he genuinely believes he has uncovered new and foundational information about the universe that all of the world's most respected and robust institutions have somehow missed. And while I do think that narcissism plays a big role in why he does what he does, I don't think that Terrence Howard actually believes everything he says. I think he is a narcissist, but not a delusional one. If he were delusional or otherwise detached from reality, I think it would present differently in conversation. Terrence Howard has the very unique skill set of cleverly dodging questions, speaking in deliberately vague and deceptive language, and avoiding the obvious pitfalls of his logic when questioned on it.
Can you tell me how a planet is formed under this theory? So you have a sun, and how does the sun give birth to these planets?
The same way we defecate and have gas, like Jupiter's, that red spot on Jupiter, that's spinning on it, that's going to become a moon. It may take a billion or 2 billion years. That will ultimately become a moon off of Jupiter. Where is it? Right at the equator. Where do we discharge at? Right at our equator.
Oh, what's that? You're actually questioning me on something insane that I said? Well, basically, planet come from sun because moon come from planet because we poop from our butts, basically. So this is behavior that is indicative of dishonesty, not delusion, as it's not something that someone suffering from a delusion would be capable of. In order to present a set of flawed ideas effectively, you must first be aware of those flaws, which means he's lying and is aware of it. Ironically enough, the exact thing that gets people to believe him and trust what he says is what gives away the fact that he's being dishonest. He can explain his ideas in what seems like great detail, going on long diatribes about physics, chemistry, and mathematics, but he can never empirically demonstrate any of those ideas or explain them in a way a layman would be able to understand.
You keep dividing light by 2, and you'll ultimately get back to the audible sound of it, because there was a relationship between light and color, sound and tone, matter and shape.
He speaks in lofty and esoteric language to give the appearance of understanding while not actually possessing any in-depth knowledge of the subjects he talks about. He mistook silicone for silicon, not knowing they were 2 different substances. He blatantly misinterprets Newton's laws to prove 1 × 1 = 2. He thinks light and sound are the same thing, just at different frequencies. On the surface, his language may sound intellectual and thorough and like it's way over your head, but literally any closer look at the actual text of what he's saying shines a light on how little he actually knows. It's a cover-up.
Now, because we have the angles of incidence, material engineering can now separate the space between carbon and nitrogen or carbon and boron and have the same elements of titanium, vanadium, chromium, magnesia, and iron, or nickel, cobalt, nickel, copper, zinc, gallium, or germanium in those higher octaves. We can do that between silicon and phosphorus or silicon and aluminum. So the transparent aluminum now becomes possible because we can now control the pressure and change the pressure and motion conditions where we couldn't do that before because they were going by Cartesian space at 90 degrees and 45 degrees straight lines. The Euclidean space that they've made up is orthogonal or church-like space that they've generated.
This word salad he spews is his imitation of what he thinks a smart person sounds like, and is why he's able to convince so many people. But it's also the very thing that gives him away. When the average person hears Terrence Howard speak, their knee-jerk reaction might just be to assume he knows what he's talking about. Like we said, his words sound intelligent and thorough at first glance, but when you take a good hard look at what he's actually saying, that's all there is. Just words. Empty ones. There is no ideology, there is no real scientific model he believes in, and there is especially no academic or practical utility to anything he says. It's all just words. But hold on. If it's really all just empty words at the end of the day, then what's the point? How can so many people be on board for something so lacking? And more importantly, why does Terrence Howard do it? What does he gain by spreading non-ideas that he knows have no substance? When I started to become aware of who he was, this is the question that confused me the most. How could someone go along with what he's saying if so much of what he is saying nothing? How can people look past all of the things that don't make sense or are blatant lies and still be on board? I mean, you see it all the time. Yeah, sure, maybe he lied about remembering his own birth, but that doesn't mean his theory about the elements and sonic frequencies isn't true. Yeah, maybe his proof of 1 × 1 = 2 is so laughably broken and riddled with holes that it would get him laughed out of a 3rd grade classroom, but that doesn't mean he's wrong about gravity. I just couldn't understand the reasons people seem to flock to his apparent understanding of the universe without first understanding it themselves. But then I started to think about Terrence Howard and his whole shtick a little bit differently. On its face, what Terrence Howard does looks like the communication of knowledge, the selfless sharing of ideas that he truly believes to be revolutionary. When he goes on The View or Joe Rogan, he'd have you believe that he just wants his information out there to dispel misconceptions we have about the universe. But it isn't that, is it? The spreading of ideas and the sharing of information may look like his end goal, but in reality, that is just the means to an entirely different end. You see, the silly things about Terrence Howard, like the fact that his ideas are really just empty words that mean nothing, or the fact that he uses random science terms to sound smart and convincing, aren't just unfortunate byproducts of his lack of understanding. They're by design. They aren't flaws in the machine, they are its main function. The language and the arguments are constructed poorly on purpose. The over-reliance on big, science-y sounding words and the lack of clear explanations for any of it are intended to disengage the audience's instinct to think critically about what he's saying.
They have expanding solar winds. So when they meet our star meets the solar wind from another star at that end of that spot. Now there's 2 pressure conditions, so you have another Lagrange spot that's happening there. That's when those waves start coming back, but they get hit, and if they hit at 120 degrees, because that's how the universe is arranged, now these things become electric. So they, instead of coming from the planar side and expanding out at the equator, they now come back up from the northern and southern parts.
By the way, the question being answered here is what happens when stars die, just in case you guys couldn't tell what the fuck was happening, like, at all. By cramming as much scientific jargon as possible into a 10-word sentence, he's deliberately trying to confuse his listeners into submission, hoping that his verbiage is interpreted as a reason to trust what he's saying, hoping that his audience skips over what he's saying and trusts him based on how he says it. He offers his audience the opportunity to throw their hands up and say, I don't know what he's saying, but he's clearly saying something, and since I don't understand it, it must be right. And that is Terrence Howard's real goal. He's not really trying to convince you of his ideas. He's trying to convince you of his own intellect. He doesn't care about physics or chemistry or math. He cares that you think he cares about it.
If you're right, so many people are wrong.
Everyone's wrong. Oh, well, the universe backs me up, and I have the proof of it. You have all these physicists that's saying something different, but none of them have 97 patents. None of them have introduced a new form of flight.
He's not earnestly trying to convey why 1 × 1 = 2 or why gravity isn't real. He's trying to make you believe that he knows something you don't, that he has access to information that you could never possibly access on your own, that the world is in the dark without his knowledge and intellect, that he is more intelligent than all of the world's institutions combined, and actually, they're lying to you, and you can only trust him. He's not trying to get information out there. He's fulfilling a God complex. Several times throughout his appearance on Joe Rogan, he readily compares himself to figures like Da Vinci or Isaac Newton or even Jesus Christ.
This is Jesus walking on water. This is the proof in the pudding.
He promotes the conspiracy theory that math as we know it is fake and that the government put fake math into the calculator on your phone to control the economy.
And our world economy is based off of 1 × 1 = 1.
You think they fuck with your phone?
Oh, I'm sure of it. You're mad. Someone programmed that lie in there and lied to you and you and everyone.
Governments, academic institutions, and the machinations of the fucking universe are all involved in a scheme at the center of which lies Terrence Howard and his revolutionary intellect. It would honestly be funny if it wasn't so sad. Despite what he says, Terrence Howard has no respect for science or knowledge. All of his ideas and theories and research are just a means to an end in order to place himself on a pedestal that is shared only by people who solely change the course of the world. He is the once-in-a-generation thinker whose intellect will single-handedly revolutionize our understanding of the universe, the Isaac Newton of the current day. And that's where the sadness comes from for me, because it is, in fact, his lack of understanding of the subjects he speaks on that allows him to believe that he's revolutionized those fields. Only someone who is mathematically illiterate could arrive at 1 × 1 = 2. Only someone who's never read a physics textbook in their life could possess the gaps in knowledge required to even question the nature of gravity or electromagnetism. It is only through his own stupidity that he can perpetuate the illusion of genius, with fancy language and big words acting as the substitute for actual knowledge. Isaac Newton famously once said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants," an allusion to all of the hard work and dedication of those before him that allowed him to make the revolutionary discoveries that he made, an acknowledgement that no matter how much of a lone genius the world may portray him as, that he is the product of countless others striving towards a shared goal: knowledge. And this is what separates Terrence Howard from the greatness that he claims to possess. Where Newton stands on the shoulders of giants, Terrence Howard acts in spite of them. Where Newton credits and applauds those who came before him and inspired his work, Terrence Howard accuses them of conspiracy and fraud. At the end of the day, Terrence Howard is not someone that anyone should be taking seriously, like ever. The only reason that anyone pays him any mind is because before he was a super genius, he was a famous actor. I could get any cracked out homeless person in the 20-mile radius from my house to talk about their opinions on the universe and would get basically the same ideas as Terrence's, but we don't spend all of our time hearing them out because they unfortunately aren't connected to reality. Oh, but if that person is rich and famous, then suddenly we start paying attention, giving their shitty ideas credence, inviting them to speak at fucking Oxford and on the largest podcast in the world, just because they can talk fancy. And that is my issue with Terrence Howard. Not only is he uneducated and a liar, but he's also a reminder of the privileges that come with class that aren't afforded to everyone, and our society's permissiveness of bullshit as long as the person saying it is of high enough status. A symbol of our lack of concern for the truth in favor of shallow, empty words that provide merely an illusion of it. Hey, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. If you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to see more stuff like this in the future. This was a really fun one to make, and I hope to be able to make more like this in the future, and liking and subscribing helps with that, so thank you in advance. But yeah, that is Terrence Howard. Kind of wild. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Because they had went the wrong direction by taking the ether out of the equation, and now I have proof of the ether and how it behaves.
Wow. I wish I could really truly understand exactly what you're saying.